Hi, I'm Genevieve Howland, aka Mama Natural, and I'm here with baby Faith Valencia. She's 6 weeks old. She is my miracle baby. I'm so grateful she's here. But let me tell you, the journey to get here today was not easy. It was filled with loss, sadness, despair, but ultimately redemption. I want to share my story to encourage others, maybe even you. So let me just start by saying, before any of this happened, we were in a great place as a family. In fact, we thought we were done. We had a boy, we had a girl, it was perfect, right? They were wonderful children, and I felt kind of lucky just in the first place because I had Griffin when I was 35, Paloma when I was 38, and it was like, whew, we got those things under our belt, you know, all is good. And where we lived at the time in Chicago, all of our friends just had 2 kids. I grew up, you know, I had one brother. Michael had one brother. It was like, that was just what people did. And then 2 things happened. The first is we moved down south, and you all do things a little differently down here. I mean, we were now surrounded by these big families, 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids. One mom had 13 children. I'm not even kidding you. And as we were around these bigger families, we thought, you know, maybe we did this wrong. Like maybe we should have tried for more kids, because it was just kind of cool to see all these kids and they all have different stories and personalities. So that was the first thing. The second thing, and really the bigger impetus, was writing our book, The Mama Natural Week by Week Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth. Michael and I ate, drank, and breathed all things pregnancy for over a year working on this book. I mean, we're looking at pictures, we're researching, we're writing, and it triggered in both of us this crazy baby fever.
One more time.
And it was kind of weird because I was 41 at the time, he was 44. We're like, why are we even thinking this? But it was like, I'm telling you, my ovaries were like, must procreate, last call, last call. So we're like, let's just pray about it. So we started praying on it, and both of us were kind of like, well, maybe we should do this. Like there was this opening for both of us. And finally, one afternoon, I had been hemming and hawing over it for weeks, and I was just sick of thinking about it. And so I just was like on my knees, like, God, I just totally surrender this to you. Like, what do you think we should do? Should we try for this 3rd kid? And it was just one of those beautiful moments that you have in your life where it was just such a spiritual moment where I literally heard Jesus sing over me, I have someone for you, you shall call her Faith. And it was so shocking to hear that. I don't know how else to describe it. I just started weeping because it was so beautiful, and I could see in my mind's eye this light. And it was just a very holy experience. Anyway, so I'm crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And then I said, well, what about Paloma? I was so worried about Paloma being the middle child. Was she going to be jealous, or what was going to happen? And this just goes to show like that Jesus has a sense of humor, because he said, are you kidding me? Paloma's going to love telling her little sister what to do. And with that, I start laughing hysterically, because if you knew Paloma, she's got very strong leadership skills, she's fierce, and she very much likes telling people what to do. So it totally reframed this idea of bringing another child into the family. And like, oh my gosh, of course she'd love to have a little sister. Like bringing another sibling into the family is actually a blessing. I told Michael about it, he was excited, so we're like, okay, let's try, let's see if we have this, you know, experience with this baby Faith. So the next month, we decided to give it a whirl. It was December, and the next month in January, I find out, like on January 1st, I pee on a stick, and it's a positive pregnancy sign.
Oh, look at this action right here.
Wow, Lord. Unbelievable.
What a story behind this baby Faith right here.
Oh my gosh, she has got an amazing story. God gave us this word, we tried, it was a long shot, and oh my gosh, we got pregnant on the first try. This is a miracle. Here comes baby Faith, yay! I have to say, I didn't have any symptoms of being pregnant, so that was like a little bit weird for me. But when I got to just under 6 weeks, I went to the bathroom, I went to wipe, and there was brown blood on the toilet paper. And that was really shocking, because I had never had that experience with any of my pregnancies. And so I was like, okay, well, what's this about? So I started just Googling it, of course. And it's actually very common. A lot of women can bleed, you know, their first trimester, and they go on to have perfectly healthy pregnancies. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just some old blood. But sure enough, that brown blood turned to bright red blood, and I ended up miscarrying. And that was the first time I'd ever had that experience. And it just changes things, because before it's like, okay, you get pregnant, you get that positive pregnancy sign, and then you're gonna have a baby, you know, and you don't think of any other reality. And now I was having this other reality, and it was really heartbreaking. And I was like, what was that about, God? Like, I obeyed, I got that word, we did it, and then this happens? I'm the kind of person, if it's not perfect, then part of me is like, I'm just gonna bail. So it's like, I got the word, I was obedient, we tried, it didn't work, I'm done. But after a couple of months, like God kind of worked on my heart, and of course, we're continuing to work on this book, it's about to launch, and I was like, you know, maybe we could try it one more time. So it was the springtime, we gave it a whirl, and sure enough, first try, we get pregnant again. I find out on Earth Day, which felt so beautiful because I'm mama natural. I'm like, oh, it's so poetic and this is awesome. And it was literally a couple days before our book, which I often refer to as my little baby, was being launched out into the world. So it just felt so poetic, so right, so good. And unlike the last pregnancy, I felt terrible. And I was so happy, which sounds so weird, but I was, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually working. Like my HCG is shooting up and I'm nauseous, my breasts are tender, my belly was bloated. My symptoms were so exaggerated that I literally was like, is this twins? And twins run in our family, and I'm older, so I thought, oh my gosh, this could be twins. This could be two. And there were also moments, I have to be completely honest, where I felt like, can I really do this? It was physically really hard. I was tired. I just did not feel good. In fact, even at, I think it was 7 weeks, I actually threw up. I had never thrown up in any of my pregnancies. I threw up. I mean, I just felt terrible. But I was grateful. I was grateful. So it just so happens the next month we were heading to Chicago for a midwife conference. So we're like, hey, let's make an appointment with our old midwives who delivered our first 2 kids and get a little quick sneak peek into my womb and see if there's 2 babies in there, because we were wondering at this point. So we make the appointment, we go in there. This is the moment of truth, right? Really quick snapshot to see if we are having 2 babies or 1 baby. So we're walking in there thinking 1 or 2, 1 or 2. So she puts the jelly in my belly, puts the wand on there, and she's like, there's just 1 baby in there. So I was like, whew, partial relief, a little bit of grief, because 2 would have been kind of cool. But then she was still kind of quiet. I'm thinking, what's going on? And that's when she said something I will never forget. She said, I'm so sorry, but the baby has no heartbeat. And I have never been so flabbergasted before in my entire life, because I was pregnant. My stomach was huge, my boobs hurt, I was so nauseous. I literally had to eat a grapefruit immediately after any time I ate, because that was the only thing that would take away this terrible acid taste. And I'm like, how could I not be pregnant? I have like every symptom. And it turns out, my midwife explained that I had something called a miscarriage, which is probably like the cruelest thing ever, because basically what happens is your baby has passed away, it has no heartbeat, but your body hasn't recognized it yet. So your body continues to produce HCG, it still thinks it's pregnant, you have all the symptoms. And she's like, okay, so I want you to process this over the weekend, and then you have 2 choices. You can do a D&C, or you can see if the baby passes naturally. So you know me, I wanted to, of course, do it naturally. So I had to go through 2 weeks of waking up nauseous, feeling exhausted, feeling bloated, and knowing that my baby was not with me anymore. So that went on for 2 weeks, and at that point, I was still kind of like, are we sure that there's no baby in here? You know, that there's no heartbeat? So I went to like urgent care, got another ultrasound just to confirm 100% that there was no heartbeat. And in that 3rd week, I had to start taking natural remedies to get this miscarriage going, because my body wasn't releasing this baby. So that was brutal. And then I literally went through labor. You know, I had back labor, contractions. I went on for like an hour and a half. And I just, what I thought of in that moment was like, oh my gosh, if this was my first pregnancy and I'd never gone through labor before, this would have been so scary and like really even more devastating. So my heart goes out to any woman in that situation. After that experience, I was like, you know what? I must have gotten this wrong. Like, I did not hear right. It was probably just wishful thinking. You know, this body cannot sustain life. I'm 42 now. Like, I'm done. I can't do this. And I continued to pray, and I still just felt like that moment with Jesus was so holy that I'm like, there had to be something true about that. And so we started thinking, well, maybe baby faith is going to come a different way. You know, who am I to say it's going to come through me? You know, maybe it's through adoption. So we started looking at domestic adoption. We looked at international adoption. It was really funny with international. Mike and I were too old for most countries to have to accept a baby. We looked at even adopting an embryo. We thought that was really cool. We looked at, natural IVF. We looked at, and then I started thinking, well, maybe baby faith or this little faith is just like a child in the community. So we started helping, doing some volunteer work. And I was looking like, oh my gosh, am I going to find a baby faith? Is there going to be a faith that I could just love on? But I never met a faith. So at this point, I just felt spiritually stuck. Like, I don't know how to move forward, God. You gave me this word. I want to, be obedient. I would love for this word to become reality, but help me, show me, what am I supposed to do? And just feeling stuck, I remembered this one pastor, Bill Johnson, talked about how people get spiritually stuck is because of two reasons. One is unforgiveness, and the other is because of some kind of disappointment. And I had both. I had unforgiveness. Part of me was mad at God. Like, why did you have me do this? You told me I was happy. I was good. I had 2 kids. They were all healthy and well. I went down this journey. Now I've had 2 losses. Like, what's the deal here? So I was definitely had unforgiveness, and I also had obviously disappointments. So I did this teaching where it literally walked you through. I went to this beautiful church, kind of like sanctuary, and I just processed, these experiences. And I have to tell you, it was really remarkable. I felt like this weight was lifted from me, and I felt that peace. And this is actually probably the first time I've ever had this. They talk about in the Bible, the peace that surpasses all understanding. Because in my mind, I could be mad, I could be disappointed, I could be upset. I tried twice, I had 2 miscarriages, but I wasn't. I had this like supernatural peace. And I felt like, what? I still know God is good. And even though I don't understand it, I can still be in this peace, and have the Prince of Peace with me. So right around that time, it was Thanksgiving, and we were in a good place now because I had processed it. I was back into gratitude. And Michael and I just so happened to be in my fertile window. We were out of town, and we're like, what the heck? Let's just, get busy and have some fun. So we did, and then sure enough, the next month, I find out I'm pregnant again. And now you might be thinking, oh my gosh, this girl is fertile myrtle. And it is kind of true. Like with all these 3 pregnancies, I got pregnant the first try, but it actually isn't a good thing because I learned that I had something that's called hyperfertility, which basically means that your uterus accepts pretty much any fertilized egg that comes down, even ones that aren't viable. And so what happens is the egg implants, and then it takes the body a little bit longer to realize, this isn't going to work. And so it kicks it out, and then you miscarry. And that was what I had been experiencing. And unfortunately, that's what happened yet again. So this is the 3rd miscarriage, okay? And I actually was bleeding over Christmas Eve, during Christmas Day. And I remember being at church at the time, and they were singing like Joy to the World and all these beautiful Christmas hymns. And I had this moment where I'm like, okay, I can make a choice here to wallow and be in the resentment, unforgiveness, disappointment, or I can choose to worship, and to still believe that He is good. And so by God's grace, I made that choice. And I'm like, what? I might not have a baby in my belly, but God chose to come to this earth as a baby, and I have Jesus. So it still wasn't the greatest Christmas, I'm going to tell you. It still felt dark, but I knew that the light of the world was with me. So that was that. And then it was the end of the year, and we were moving, which felt like really good because I was like, let's just shift the energy, get out of that house that I had 3 miscarriages. And I was really glad to wrap up that year because it was a hard year. And it was New Year's Eve, and we were at our new place. And we just decided to stay home and just celebrate as a family. So we cooked lobsters, we danced, we just were with our kids. It was a great night. And, we were looking forward to January 1st, new year, new start. And that night was the most gorgeous, huge full moon. In fact, they called it a super moon because that month there was 2 full moons, which is kind of rare. And so that night, Mike and I had some fun, if you know what I mean. And sure enough, like 10 days later, I pee on a stick and I find out I'm pregnant. And I almost laughed at this point because I'm like, I hadn't even had a menstrual cycle in between my loss and this now another pregnancy. And so I was like, you know what, God, this is yours. Like, I cannot even go here. I'm just going to lay this at your feet because I cannot get my hopes up. I can't work it. I can't control it. I just surrender this to you. And so that's what I did, like literally every day, and unlike some of the other ones, like I did feel pregnant. I was tired. My boobs were getting bigger. So there were some encouraging signs. I'll never forget when I got past that 6 weeks and I didn't see any blood. And so that was good. Got past 9 weeks, which was when the other miscarriage in Chicago happened. But really the moment for me was at 14 weeks when I finally had the courage to go to my midwife and be like, okay, let's do a Doppler. And when I walked into that office, I was like, I wasn't sure, again, if my body was going to fool me and I was having this miscarriage or whether there was actually going to be a heartbeat. Thank you, Jesus. So hearing that heartbeat was incredibly joyful. I was like on cloud 9 driving home. But I also was guarded, to be really honest, because I still didn't know how this pregnancy was going to turn out. So I just, again, turned it over. And there was almost like this little part of me that was just, I don't know, couldn't fully embrace the reality that I actually was pregnant because of so many losses. So anyways, we get to the 20-week mid-pregnancy scan. I wanted it done. I wanted to be sure everything was okay, and everything looked great. And that was so encouraging. And then it was like, you know what? It's probably time to tell people that I'm pregnant. I had not told like really anyone at this point. So that was really huge. And that felt really vulnerable to be like, hey, I'm pregnant, because I wasn't, again, sure how it's going to turn out, but I did. And before you know it, I'm 25 weeks, 30 weeks, things are just clicking along. And if you looked on the outside, the pregnancy was a beautiful pregnancy. I mean, I had no high blood pressure, no swelling, like no gestational diabetes, no GBS positive, all the things that could happen, right? And then now that I'm so high risk, I'm almost 43, but God was just all over the pregnancy. Like, it was just blessed, and it was very ordinary, but also very sacred, right? So I sailed all the way through up to my due date. I even went 2 days over. And at that point, I literally was like, is this ever going to really happen? I mean, I was almost like so disconnected in some ways. I was like, is my faith going to become sight? So it was 2 days after my due date. And sure enough, at 1:11 a.m., I was woken up by a contraction. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my gosh, my body is going into labor. And it went really, really fast. And in fact, it ended up being just me and my husband. He's the one that basically delivered the baby, and our little baby Faith. And in retrospect, it was really beautiful just to be the three of us, because that was our journey. We had gone through this experience, this whole TTC journey for like 2 years. And so it was really cool that actually ended up being just us. Our midwife came about 10, 15 minutes later, so she was able to help me with the placenta and stuff like that. We have a whole video about that if you want to see it, or if you haven't seen it, we'll put a link to that. Okay, one thing I do want to add, because I have gotten tons of questions about this. Was there anything I did differently in that 4th try? Okay, because I saw a lot of moms that have 2 miscarriages and then the 3rd time was the charm. But not a lot that had 3 miscarriages and the 4th time worked. So what happened in that 4th try that made it stick? I think it was just God's timing, right? I want to give him the glory. There were some things I did do differently. And it gets real technical, and there's studies and supplement links and stuff like that. So I'll include a link to an article on my site where I go into the nitty-gritty details of some of the things that I did, just in case it might help you. So that's it. And now we have this beautiful baby girl, and she is amazing. And now I am so gaga in love with her, because it's almost like I can now experience the joy of being pregnant and the joy of having her, like all wrapped up into one. And she absolutely completes our family. Faith, that name was never on my list of names for any child, but it's so perfect, and I just love it. And it was such a journey of faith. And I think that her name was also so powerful, because it helped me through when I had the 2nd loss and the 3rd loss. It was like, I gotta keep the faith. I gotta keep the faith. Like, her name was so perfect. So God makes beauty out of ashes. And so if he gives you a desire in your heart for another child, and you've had repeated loss, like, know that there is hope. And I look at her and I'm like, I'm so grateful that I didn't give up, And sometimes they come through us, sometimes they come through adoption, sometimes they come through foster care. They can come in so many different ways, but this was just my story. And so I wanted to share it in case you're an older mom that thinks, oh my gosh, it's too late. I'm here to say, hey, I'm 43, I had a baby, okay? And she's healthy and great. Or if you've had repeated miscarriages and you do feel like you're supposed to carry life, don't give up. Keep the faith. So thanks for watching. I love you, and we'll catch you next time.